Tonight we step into a world where fear shapes every corner of daily life, where a strange noise at night or a sudden illness can spark whispers of dark magic. This isn't the world of fairy tale witches with pointy hats and cauldrons. No, this is the cold, anxious reality of what it truly meant to be accused of witchcraft. I'm the candlelight historian, and this is history as it was lived. Unforgiving, unfiltered, and brutally real. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy these late-night dives into the strange corners of the past. Now, take a deep breath, let the day slip away, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The fear of witchcraft is not born out of mystery alone. It is born out of fear itself. Imagine living in a world where nothing is certain, where crops fail without warning, illness spreads through entire families overnight, and lightning strikes can set whole villages ablaze. You have no weather forecast, no medicine, no understanding of bacteria or infection. The world feels unpredictable, almost hostile, and when something goes wrong, someone must be blamed. In this fragile world, witchcraft becomes the perfect answer to every misfortune. A failed harvest, surely someone cursed the fields. A sick child, maybe a neighbor whispered with the devil. People are desperate to explain the unexplainable, and fear is the glue that holds these ideas together. Everywhere you look, you see signs of a community living on the edge. There are no safety nets. If a storm wipes out the crops, the village starves. If the animals fall ill, there will be no meat, no milk, no trade. And when life is this uncertain, humans cling to stories. Stories of witches and dark forces are not just entertainment. They are warnings, ways to make sense of chaos. The church feeds these fears with sermons that thunder about sin and the devil. Priests tell stories of demons lurking in the shadows, waiting for weak souls to bargain with them. People are told that witches walk among them, ordinary faces hiding extraordinary evil. And the scariest part is the witch could be anyone. A neighbor, a friend, even the quiet woman who gave you herbs when you had a fever. This paranoia seeps into every aspect of village life. You start to notice the way people look at each other, glances that linger too long, whispers that fade as soon as you approach. Maybe someone's cow has stopped producing milk, or someone's bread won't rise. It's easier to believe that a curse is at work than to admit that life is sometimes cruel without reason. The fear of witchcraft isn't just a fear of magic, it's a fear of the unknown. And in a time when the unknown is everywhere, that fear can spread like wildfire. There's something unsettling about how quickly people turn on each other. One small misstep, a word out of place, a habit that looks unusual, and suddenly you're under suspicion. Did you smile when someone's luck turned bad? Did you mutter to yourself while walking home? Did you happen to own a cat, or worse, a black one? In a world like this, even the most innocent details can be twisted into evidence of witchcraft. It's not that everyone truly believes they're surrounded by witches, it's that they're afraid not to believe. To question the fear is to risk becoming its next target. So the villagers nod along, crossing themselves, whispering prayers, hoping that if they feed the fear, it won't come for them. Imagine walking through the village square in this atmosphere. The muddy ground is covered in wagon tracks and footprints, and the air smells faintly of smoke from the morning fires. You pass the church, its doors open, the priest's voice echoing warnings about Satan's influence. A group of women at the well pause their conversation as you pass. One of them makes the sign of the cross. You can't help but wonder if she's protecting herself from you. The fear of witchcraft is more than a story. It is a living thing, growing in every corner of this world. feeding on every bad harvest, every unexplained death, every streak of bad luck. And for the people who live here, the line between safety and accusation is thinner than a strand of straw on the roof of your hut. This fear is not going anywhere. It will build. It will turn ordinary neighbors into enemies. And soon, it will find its next victim. Picture yourself standing in a crowded village square, the dirt beneath your feet still wet from last night's rain. People bustle around with baskets of turnips and loaves of bread. But there's a tension in the air that's hard to ignore. Somewhere in this crowd is the next witch, though no one knows who yet. Or maybe they do, and they're just waiting for the right moment to point the finger. The truth is, almost anyone could be accused. Witchcraft accusations rarely followed logic. If someone looked different, lived alone, or simply didn't fit into the social mold, they were at risk. But certain groups of people had targets painted on their backs from the start. The most common targets were women, particularly older women who had outlived their husbands. Widows were especially vulnerable. Without a man to vouch for them, they were often viewed with suspicion. A solitary life, combined with even a hint of independence, was enough to spark rumors. Maybe she had too many herbs drying in her kitchen. Maybe she spoke to herself. Maybe she gave advice about ailments, and her remedies worked a little too well. Suddenly, she wasn't just helpful, she was dangerous. But it wasn't only the elderly. Young women, especially those who were outspoken or too beautiful for their own good, could also be accused. Envy played its part. If someone's flirtation turned sour, or if jealousy took root in the wrong heart. An accusation of witchcraft could silence a rival or punish someone for simply standing out. Men weren't entirely safe either, though women made up the majority of the accused. Men who practiced healing, midwifery, or unorthodox religious ideas could also become victims. Anyone who stood slightly outside the accepted order, a farmer who experimented with crops, a healer who claimed to know too much, could be branded a witch. Then there were the outsiders. Anyone not born in the village, anyone without strong family connections, lived under a silent cloud of suspicion. Strangers were easy targets because no one really knew them. And if misfortune struck soon after an outsider arrived, a cow's milk soured, or a child fell ill, well, the explanation was clear enough for those desperate to find one. Children could also be accused. As absurd as it sounds, history holds cases of children, barely old enough to read, being accused of serving the devil. Sometimes they were swept up in waves of mass hysteria, dragged along with the crowd's fear until even their innocence couldn't protect them. It's unsettling how fast suspicion could grow. Imagine you are a widow living on the edge of town. You keep to yourself because the days are long and tiring. One day, your neighbor's cow stops giving milk. Another neighbor has a string of bad luck with his crops. None of this has anything to do with you. But when people need a reason, they will find one. Suddenly, they remember that odd comment you made at the well last month, or that time you refused to lend someone bread. The story begins to write itself, and you're the villain in the plot. Even kindness could backfire. If you gave someone a remedy and it didn't work, they might whisper that you'd cursed them. If it did work, they might claim your powers came from the devil. Either way, you lose. It didn't take much, a glance, a muttered word, a simple misunderstanding, for the shadow of witchcraft to fall over someone. People who were accused were often those who didn't have the strength or social standing to fight back. The poor, the elderly, the vulnerable, they had no allies to protect them once the crowd turned. You can almost feel how isolating it must have been. The way the world shrinks when people start stepping back from you, when neighbors who once smiled now turn their faces away. Being accused wasn't just about fear of punishment. It was about losing your place in the only world you knew. It was being turned into something less than human. Every village had a list, even if it wasn't written down. A quiet, unspoken list of those who might fit the part. The ones who looked wrong, or lived wrong, or simply made others uncomfortable. Maybe you're on that list and don't even know it. You can almost see the line of faces in the square now. The worried mother clutching her child, the farmer glaring at the sky, the priest preaching about the dangers of sin, and somewhere among them, a few people glance in your direction. Maybe they're already telling your story. If fear is the fuel, gossip is the spark that lights the fire. In a village where news travels faster than the smoke from morning fires, a single whispered accusation can grow into a full-blown storm before you even realize it's begun. You don't need written newspapers or official announcements here. The marketplace, the church steps, and the well are the only news channels anyone needs. Someone says something offhand, someone else repeats it with a little extra drama, and by the time it's made the rounds, the story has grown claws. Imagine, you're walking to the well with your bucket, and as you approach, two women lower their voices. One tilts her head slightly in your direction, her eyes sliding toward you like a warning. You know they're talking about you, but you'll never know exactly what was said. Maybe it started innocently, she's always in the woods, but by the time the sentence spreads, it becomes she was seen dancing with spirits under the moon. The truth doesn't matter as much as the story people prefer to believe. And stories about witches are far more entertaining than the dull, daily truth. It's easier for someone to say she cursed my cow than admit they fed the cow bad hay. It's easier to whisper, her touch is unlucky, than to face the fact that life is often unfair for no reason at all. Gossip works because it gives people power. In a village where almost everyone is powerless against disease, famine, and harsh winters, being the first to accuse someone else is a form of self-preservation. If you point the finger, you keep it from pointing at you. No one wants to be the next person called to the church for questioning, so they join the chorus of whispers. You might think you can stop gossip by defending yourself, but that only makes it worse. The more you protest, the more guilty you seem. The harder you argue, the more convinced people become that you're hiding something. And if you say nothing at all, well, silence is just as suspicious. Gossip doesn't just stay with the neighbors, either. It climbs the social ladder. A rumor whispered at the well in the morning might be discussed in the church by noon. And by evening, Father Anselm will be holding a private conversation about your soul's condition. The higher the rumor climbs, the more official it feels. Like it's no longer gossip, but fact. The most dangerous part is how quickly a simple story turns into a collective truth. Once enough people believe it, it stops being questioned. One person says you cursed their bread. Another swears they saw a shadow move strangely near your home, and soon the entire village is nodding in agreement. It doesn't matter that none of them saw anything real. The story is alive, and it's feeding on their fear. Imagine hearing your own name spoken like that, not with warmth or familiarity, but with unease. You walk past a group of people, and they fall silent mid-sentence, their eyes darting anywhere but your face. Your friends, the ones who used to wave or smile, start keeping their distance. It's not personal to them. It's survival. Being seen as too close to you could make them the next target. This is how witchcraft accusations grow, not with a single dramatic moment, but with dozens of small, quiet ones. A word here, a glance there, a shrug that means you know how she is. It creeps into the fabric of the village until it feels like the accusation has always been there, just waiting to be spoken out loud. By the time you realize how far it's gone, the damage is already done. It's no longer just gossip. It's a story the entire village believes. And you're the main character, the villain they didn't know they needed. And there's nothing more dangerous than being cast as the villain in a fearful community that needs someone to blame. Once gossip grows loud enough, it always finds its way to the church. In a medieval village, the church is more than a place of prayer. It is the moral compass, the judge, and often the only authority people truly fear. If the priest says something is evil, then it is evil. No arguments, no second opinions. And now, with whispers about witchcraft floating through the streets, Father Anselm is watching you in a way that feels colder than before. The church thrives on certainty, and certainty is hard to come by in this world. So when crops fail or children get sick, the priest is quick to explain why. It is the devil's work, he tells the congregation. Witches are among you, tempting you to turn away from God. People nod, clutching their rosaries, looking around as though expecting to see a witch standing in the aisle. Fear works like that. Once planted, it grows fast, and the church knows exactly how to water it. You can feel Father Anselm's eyes on you during Mass. He doesn't accuse you directly, but the weight of his stare makes your neck prickle. He mentions sin more often in his sermons now, leaning heavily on words like corruption and temptation. His voice rises when he talks about those who consort with dark forces. And even though he doesn't point at you, people's eyes shift in your direction. It's subtle, but not subtle enough to ignore. The church is not simply a spiritual guide. It's a political force. It has the power to decide who is good and who is damned. If the priest believes you've strayed from the light, the entire village will follow. It doesn't matter how many kind deeds you've done, or how many loaves of bread you shared in the past. One word from him can undo a lifetime of trust. Sometimes the accusations don't even start with the villagers. Sometimes it's the church itself that stirs the fire. Priests are not immune to the same fears that haunt everyone else. A failed harvest might lead Father Anselm to wonder if someone in the village has brought God's wrath. A sudden illness might be framed as punishment for letting evil walk among them. And once the priest begins asking questions, it's not long before those questions turn into demands. You've seen how this plays out before. Last year, a farmer's wife was called in for questioning because she was too skilled at healing fevers. People had gone to her for years, grateful for her remedies, but when her cures worked better than the prayers offered at church, suspicion crept in. Father Anselm demanded she swear her loyalty to God in front of the congregation. She did, but her life was never the same afterward. People avoided her. She moved to a neighboring village and never returned. You try to stay invisible during Mass now. Sitting in the back pew, you lower your head when the priest scans the crowd. But invisibility is tricky when you're already under a shadow. Every cough, every slight movement feels like a spotlight. If you shift uncomfortably during the sermon about witches, someone will notice. If you stay too still, someone else will whisper that you're hiding something. The church's power lies in its ability to decide what is normal. And right now, being normal means being afraid. To question the fear is to risk being branded a threat. Father Anselm doesn't need proof. He just needs to sense the tiniest hint of darkness. The villagers will fill in the rest with their own wild imaginations. It's not just Sunday sermons either. The church bells, which once marked the rhythm of daily life, now carry a different weight. When they ring, You wonder if it's a call to prayer or a call to gather evidence against you. You imagine Father Anselm standing in the belfry, looking out over the village like a watchful hawk. As the day fades, the priest's words echo in your mind. Sin must be rooted out. Witches must be punished. The devil hides in plain sight. It's all too easy to imagine him talking about you, even if he hasn't said your name yet. If you think logic will protect you, you're mistaken. In this world, evidence of witchcraft can be anything from the way your cat looks at someone to a mole on your arm. People see what they want to see, and when fear is in charge, it doesn't take much for ordinary things to become signs of the devil's work. Take birthmarks, for instance. A small patch of darker skin, a freckle, or even a scar can be called a witch's mark. People believe it's a brand left by the devil, proof that you've made a pact with dark forces. Midwives and so-called witch hunters will examine your body with disturbing intensity, poking and prodding to see if they can find something that looks suspicious. And if they do, that's all the proof they need. Then there are your animals. Owning a cat is risky, especially a black one. Cats are believed to be familiars, spirit companions for witches. Even a friendly cat that likes to curl up near the fire can become a piece of evidence. The same goes for any animal that seems unusually clever or tame. A crow that lingers near your door, a dog that follows you around. To frighten minds, it's not just coincidence, it's magic. The plants you keep can also betray you. Maybe you have a collection of herbs drying near the fire, perfectly normal for cooking or healing. But two others, those bundles of leaves, look like tools for curses. A simple tea for headaches becomes a potion, and your knowledge of which plants heal and which ones harm suddenly becomes suspicious. Even your personality can work against you. Are you too quiet? You must be plotting. Are you too outspoken? You're challenging the order. Are you too helpful? People will think you're buying their trust to mask your evil. Are you too unfriendly? They'll say you're hiding something. There is no way to win when people have already decided you're guilty. Superstition gives meaning to the meaningless. If someone dreams about you, they might take it as a sign that you're bewitching them. If you happen to pass by just before a storm hits, that's suspicious timing. A farmer's horse throws a shoe. Well, maybe you walked by that stable last week, and now he remembers your odd glance. Little fragments of coincidence stack up, each one harmless, alone but damning when piled together. The worst part is that once people decide you're a witch, they start looking for signs everywhere. And when you look hard enough, you always find something. A neighbor might swear they heard strange noises near your home at night. Someone else claims they saw your shadow move oddly. They'll twist every detail of your life into something dark and unnatural. Imagine waking up each day knowing that anything you do could be turned into proof. If you smile at the wrong moment, someone will say you're mocking them. If you look worried, they'll say you're afraid of being caught. Even staying silent doesn't help. Silence is often seen as a guilty person's shield. This is how fragile life can be when fear takes hold. A handful of odd looks, a few unlucky events, and suddenly your existence is under a magnifying glass. People who once asked for your bread or your healing teas now cross themselves when you pass. You can feel their eyes scanning you, hunting for something to confirm the story they've already told themselves. The truth is, no one really knows what a witch is supposed to look like. There are no rules, no real evidence. It's just whatever makes people feel safer, blaming someone else for the things they can't understand. If that means pointing to a freckle or a stray cat, they'll do it without hesitation. Tonight, as you lie in bed, you find yourself wondering which of your belongings could be turned into evidence. The herbs hanging on the wall, the old wooden spoon with strange burn marks, even the scarf your grandmother made. Someone might say it looks like a charm. The thought is unsettling, but it's the reality of this world. Anything can be twisted into a sign of evil if the right person wants it to be. Once whispers grow loud enough, they tend to attract people who claim to be experts. Enter the witch hunters. These aren't hunters in the heroic sense, but men, and occasionally women, who've made it their life's mission to seek out evil. They wander from town to town, offering their services like traveling merchants, except what they sell isn't grain or cloth. They sell fear. The witch hunter arrives with a confident air, as if he knows exactly what a witch looks like, as if he can sense darkness in the air. He'll gather the villagers in the square, tell them about signs of the devil, and nod solemnly as people list their misfortunes. He listens like a man who already knows the ending of the story, waiting only for you to admit your part in it. One of their favorite tools is a book. Perhaps you've heard of Malleus Maleficarum, which translates to the Hammer of Witches. Written in the 15th century by men who were far too certain of their own righteousness. It became the go-to manual for finding and punishing witches. The book is less about truth and more about convincing everyone that witches are real everywhere and incredibly dangerous. It outlines what to look for, how to question people, and, most grimly, how to extract a confession when someone won't give one freely. You can imagine the witch hunter flipping through the pages, quoting passages with grim satisfaction. "Do you see?" he'll say to the villagers. "Do you see how this mark on her skin matches the signs described here? Do you see how she mutters when she walks? These are all listed. These are not coincidences." His words land heavy because they are printed in ink, and in this world, ink holds power. Witch hunters are clever. They know fear makes people obedient. They'll set up tests, promising that if you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about. They'll examine your home, your belongings, even your body, searching for anything they can twist into evidence. And they rarely leave empty-handed, because the entire point is to confirm what people already suspect. Sometimes, they even charge for their services. It's a grim transaction. The village pays them to investigate, which means they need to find something to prove they're worth the price. It's no surprise that their hunts almost always end with someone accused. It doesn't help that their presence is almost theatrical. They arrive wearing long coats or carrying strange tools, speaking with authority that sounds unshakable. They're part detective, part preacher, part showman, and the villagers, already on edge, are desperate for someone to tell them they're doing the right thing. You can almost picture it now. The hunter standing in the square with Father Anselm by his side, nodding gravely as he explains how evil hides in plain sight. He tells them about witches who curse milk, who whisper storms into existence, who bring illness with a single look. The villagers listen, wide-eyed, hanging on every word because it's both terrifying and satisfying to believe there's someone to blame. The manual gives these witch hunters a false sense of science. It lists methods for detecting guilt, searching for witches' teats where familiars supposedly suckle, or pricking the skin to find places that won't bleed. If your body doesn't react the way they expect, they claim it's proof you're unnatural. It's a game you can't win because the rules are designed to trap you. Worse still, once a witch hunter takes interest in you, it's nearly impossible to escape suspicion. Even if you're cleared, the stain of accusation lingers. People remember the time you stood in the square while he circled you like a wolf, muttering about signs of dark magic. they'll never look at you the same way again. As night falls, you can't help but wonder what will happen if a witch hunter comes here next. You can almost hear his voice already, reading from that dreadful book, telling everyone what they already want to believe. Once the whispers harden into accusations, the next step is proving them, though proof in this time is a word stretched far beyond reason. To modern ears, the tests and trials sound absurd, almost laughable. But for those who lived through them, these tests were deadly serious, and failing them could mean the difference between walking home or never returning at all. The most infamous test is the swimming trial. If the villagers suspect you of witchcraft, they'll tie your hands and feet, sometimes even weighing you down with stones, and toss you into a river or pond. The logic is twisted. Water is considered pure, and it is believed that a witch's body will reject it, refusing to sink. If you float, they'll say you're guilty and pull you out for punishment. If you sink, well, congratulations, you're innocent, but also drowning. It's a test designed to prove guilt either way. Another favorite is the needle test. Witch hunters claim that witches have devil's marks, spots on their skin that feel no pain and don't bleed when pricked. So they'll jab you with long, sharp needles, pressing against every freckle, scar, or mole they can find. If one of these spots doesn't bleed as much as they think it should, they'll declare it evidence of your pact with dark forces. It doesn't matter that skin doesn't always bleed evenly, or that nerves don't always react the same way. They see what they want to see. Then there are the touch tests, where you're brought face to face with someone who claims you bewitched them. If they flinch when you touch them, it's considered proof. If they don't flinch, it's also considered proof because your powers are thought to be hiding. It's like living in a nightmare where every outcome is twisted against you. Some trials rely on absurd rituals. There's one test where they force you to recite prayers. If you stumble over a word or hesitate too long, they'll take it as a sign of guilt. Of course, when you're standing in front of an angry crowd, your voice trembling and your hands shaking, even the simplest prayer is hard to get right. They don't see fear, they see evidence. And then there's the bread and cheese test. A piece of food is blessed by a priest and placed in your mouth. If you choke or gag, which, let's be honest, is entirely possible when you're terrified and all eyes are on you, it's considered a sign that evil spirits are rejecting holy food. If you swallow it, tuously, they might say you've been helped by dark forces. There is no path to innocence in these trials. The worst part is that these tests aren't just done quietly. They're public events, almost like grim theater. The villagers gather around, watching with wide, fearful eyes. Some of them are probably relieved it's you in the center of attention and not them. Others are there for the grim curiosity of it all, because fear and fascination often go hand in hand. Imagine standing there, your wrists bound, as people you've known for years stare at you like you're something dangerous. The hunter or the priest announces the test, the crowd murmurs, and every small movement you make is scrutinized. Your heart is pounding so hard you can feel it in your throat, and you know no matter what happens, you're unlikely to walk away free of suspicion. In the rare case someone passes a test, the shadow of doubt remains. People will whisper, maybe the devil helped her hide her guilt. The logic is a trap with no escape. Once accused, innocence is almost impossible to prove. Tonight, as you think of these trials, the idea that anyone can be declared guilty by something as random as floating in water or tripping over a prayer feels unreal. But this is the reality of the time. Truth doesn't matter. Survival is a game of chance, and the dice are loaded against you. once the tests fail to produce clear answers, or if the authorities simply want more drama, the next step is questioning. And by questioning, they usually mean torture. In the eyes of the church and the witch hunters, a confession is the ultimate proof. But most people don't confess because they're guilty. They confess because pain and fear have a way of tearing the truth apart. The methods are grim. Some are simple, like tying ropes tightly around your arms or legs until the circulation cuts off, causing unbearable pain. Others are far more brutal. The rack is one of their favorite devices. A long wooden frame with ropes attached. They stretch you slowly, joint by joint, until it feels like your body might snap. And all the while, they're asking the same questions. Who are your accomplices? What spells have you cast? Did you sign a pact with the devil? Even if you swear you're innocent, they'll tell you that the devil is helping you resist. If you cry too much, they'll say it's fake. If you're too quiet, they'll claim it's proof of your guilt. There's no right answer when the entire process is designed to break you. Some confessions are encouraged through sleeplessness. You might be locked in a cold cell, kept awake for days with loud noises, bright lanterns, and constant prodding. After enough time, your mind starts to blur. Words slip out that you don't even mean, just because you want it all to stop. Then there's the terrifying chair of interrogation, covered in spikes. You're forced to sit there, sometimes for hours, while they demand answers. Even if they don't tighten the restraints, the sheer pressure of sitting on metal points cuts into your skin. Add the cold, damp air of the dungeon, and every minute feels like an eternity. And yet, all of this is presented as justice. They believe that if you're truly innocent, God will give you the strength to endure. That belief is almost crueler than the torture itself, because it means your suffering is taken as proof no matter what you say. Imagine being trapped in that small, dark room, the air heavy with the smell of smoke and damp stone. The witch hunter leans in, his voice calm but sharp. Just admit it, he says. Say you flew with the devil. Say you cursed the village. You know that admitting to something false could cost your life. But the pain is so overwhelming that even death starts to sound like a relief. That's why so many people confess to impossible things. Flying on broomsticks, dancing with demons, turning into animals. It's not because they believe it or even understand it. It's because their bodies and minds can't take any more. The words tumble out just to make it end. Once a confession is signed, it doesn't matter how it was obtained. It becomes fact, written in ink and sealed with official approval. The villagers hear about it, and their fears are confirmed. She admitted it, they say, ignoring the broken state you were in when you spoke those words. To them, it's proof that everything they feared was true. The tragedy is that even confessing won't always save you. Sometimes it's just the first step to your punishment. At best, a confession might lead to a lighter sentence, like public humiliation or banishment. At worst, it seals your fate for execution. Lying in your small bed tonight, you can almost feel the chill of that interrogation room. You imagine the heavy footsteps of guards, the sound of ropes tightening, the echo of your own breath as you try to stay calm. It's the kind of fear that never truly leaves you, even when you close your eyes. While witch hunts spread across Europe for centuries, none are as infamous today as the events that unfolded in Salem, Massachusetts. In 1692, Salem's story is a chilling reminder of how fear and suspicion can spiral out of control, even in a community where everyone knows everyone else's name. It all began with a few young girls behaving strangely. They had fits, shaking, screaming, speaking in strange voices, and no one could explain why. In a place where belief in the supernatural ran deep, it didn't take long for someone to whisper the word witch. Once that word was spoken, it stuck like tar. The girls named names, and when someone pointed a finger, others quickly followed. The town was small, tightly knit, and already tense. Families were feuding over land. The local church was divided by arguments over leadership. There was a deep mistrust of outsiders, and the harshness of frontier life made people eager to blame anything but themselves when things went wrong. Witchcraft, with all its terrifying and simple explanations, became the perfect scapegoat. In just a few months, more than 200 people were accused of practicing witchcraft. It wasn't just women this time. Men were accused, too, along with children. Even a dog was suspected of being possessed and was executed. Fear didn't discriminate. The trials themselves were anything but fair. People were forced to testify against neighbors, and their words were treated like gospel truth. If a girl claimed she saw you dancing with the devil in a dream, it was taken as evidence, spectral evidence. They called it visions, dreams, and feelings. Something that exists only in someone's mind could be enough to end your life. Once accused, your chances of clearing your name were slim. Denying the charge often made people more certain you were guilty. Confessing, as twisted as it sounds, was sometimes safer. Those who admitted to witchcraft and named others were spared the gallows, at least temporarily. Those who refused to confess were often hanged. One of the most tragic cases was that of Giles Corey, an elderly farmer who refused to plead guilty or innocent. His silence frustrated the court, so they used a brutal method called pressing. Heavy stones were placed on his chest, one after another, until he could no longer breathe. His final words, according to legend, were more weight. The hysteria in Salem eventually burned itself out, but not before 20 people were executed, 19 by hanging and 1 by crushing, and many others died in prison. By the time the community realized its mistake, it was too late. The damage was done, and the stain of those events lingers even now. What makes the Salem story so haunting is how ordinary the people were. These weren't strangers. They were neighbors, family members, and friends. Yet fear turned them against one another. The same fear that made someone side-eye your herbs or your cat was alive and well in Salem, just amplified by 100 voices shouting witch. Imagine living in that town during those months. Every knock on the door could mean an accusation. Every look from a neighbor could be the last friendly glance before suspicion takes over. You would speak carefully, dress carefully, and even breathe carefully, because any small thing could be twisted into evidence. Salem wasn't unique, not really. It's just the witch hunt that history remembers most. But what happened there could, and did, happen in countless other villages. The ingredients were always the same: fear, gossip, a touch of jealousy, and a few people willing to push the story forward for their own gain. When you think of Salem, you realize that the scariest part of witch trials isn't the talk of dark magic or curses. It's how quickly ordinary people can turn against each other, convinced that they're doing the right thing. That's the true nightmare. Long before Salem, Europe was already drenched in centuries of fear and blood from witch hunts. From the 15th century to the 18th, tens of thousands of people were accused, tried, and often executed under the belief that they had made pacts with the devil. Entire regions were swept up in waves of paranoia, each witch hunt feeding the next like a chain reaction of fear. These hunts were not random events. They usually began during times of crisis. Bad weather that ruined crops, plagues that swept through towns, or wars that left people hungry and desperate. When life becomes unbearable, people search for someone to blame, and in those days, the concept of a witch was as clear an enemy as anyone could imagine. It didn't matter that most of the accused were just ordinary villagers who happened to stand out. One of the largest witch hunts took place in Germany, particularly in the regions of Würzburg and Bamberg in the early 1600s. Hundreds of people, including children and clergy, were accused and executed. The accusations spiraled so far out of control that even wealthy, respected citizens weren't safe. Imagine being the mayor of a city, only to find yourself accused of summoning storms or turning wine sour. It happened, and once the accusation was made, almost no one escaped. Scotland, too, was notorious for its witch hunts. King James VI of Scotland, later James I of England, was obsessed with the idea of witchcraft. He even wrote a book called Demonology that laid out his beliefs about witches and how they should be hunted. His influence sparked some of the most brutal trials in Scottish history. In North Berwick, dozens of people were accused of plotting against the king by raising storms to sink his ship. Under torture, they confessed to impossible things, like flying through the air or meeting with the devil in the form of a cat. France had its share of witch trials as well, though often they were tied to local feuds or even politics. In some villages, an accusation could be as simple as calling someone out for a misfortune, a cow dying, a child falling ill, and then the rumor would spiral into a formal trial. Once the local authorities or the church got involved, the accused person's life was in real danger. The hunts were often brutal because they had an official stamp of approval. Witch hunters were paid to find witches, and their livelihood depended on proving that witches existed. So they found them. They would travel from village to village, armed with manuals like Malleus Maleficarum, ready to point out evidence wherever they could. And once one person was accused, it often led to a domino effect, with that person naming others under pressure or torture. Entire communities were torn apart in the process. Even the methods of execution varied by region. In Germany and much of Central Europe, burning at the stake was common. In England, hanging was the preferred method. The executions were public, not just as punishment, but as a warning. Villagers would gather to watch, partly out of fear and partly out of a grim curiosity. People wanted to see what a witch looked like at the end, as if there would be some obvious sign of evil in the face of someone who was, in reality, just as human as they were. Imagine living through that kind of fear, knowing that one wrong word, one bad harvest, or one envious neighbor could land you in the same position. You'd spend every day watching what you said, who you spoke to, even how you carried yourself. A simple frown could be twisted into proof of bad intentions. A sudden storm could make someone whisper your name. European witch hunts lasted for centuries because fear is contagious. Once people decided witches were real, every accident, every unexplained sickness, every tragedy seemed like confirmation. It wasn't until the Enlightenment, when reason and science began to push back against superstition, that the hunts began to slow. But by then, countless lives had already been destroyed. Even now, when you think of those centuries, it's hard not to imagine the chill of it. The feeling of being constantly watched, judged, and suspected, knowing that a single unlucky event could make your neighbors turn on you in an instant. Once a single person is accused of witchcraft, it rarely stops there. Accusations spread through a village like cracks in ice, creeping outwards until no one feels safe. One person points a finger, and suddenly everyone else begins wondering who else might be in league with dark forces. Fear, once unleashed, refuses to stay contained. Imagine standing in a crowded square as the first accusation is spoken aloud. The air is tense, people shifting uneasily, glancing at each other. A neighbor who once felt like family is now staring at their shoes, afraid to make eye contact. The accused person protests, of course, swearing innocence, but the words sound hollow against the rising tide of suspicion. Once that seed is planted, the entire community feels it, a quiet, unspoken question hanging in the air. If one which can hide among us, who else might be hiding? The social domino effect often begins with fear and ends with betrayal. To save themselves, some accused individuals would name others. Sometimes it was done under torture, when pain made clear thinking impossible. Other times it was a desperate strategy, believing that pointing to someone else might shift the spotlight just long enough to survive. Unfortunately, this tactic worked too well. The new names added fuel to the fire, creating a chain reaction of paranoia. Even neighbors who had no quarrel with each other might turn suspicious. Someone remembers a time when you didn't lend them flour. Someone else recalls that you walk in the woods alone too often. Tiny slights, forgotten arguments, and ordinary differences suddenly take on sinister meaning. The village begins looking for patterns where none exist, and everything becomes a sign of hidden evil. The worst part is that once a witch hunt begins, silence can be deadly. If you defend an accused person too strongly, people start asking why. Are you protecting them because you're also guilty? Are you part of the same coven? It's safer to nod along, to mutter something vague about being cautious, than to speak the truth. This is how friends turn into witnesses, and witnesses turn into accusers. Public gatherings become tense. The marketplace, once a place of chatter and laughter, feels heavy with watchfulness. People avoid each other's eyes, afraid that even a friendly gesture could be misinterpreted. Every cough, every odd look, every slip of the tongue is noted, and repeated later in whispers behind closed doors. And then there's the strange sense of power that comes with accusation. People who have spent their entire lives with no influence suddenly hold the fate of their neighbors in their hands. A single word from them can bring someone to trial. It's intoxicating and terrifying all at once. The village, once united by survival and shared hardship, fractures under the weight of this new, poisonous hierarchy. Those who accuse and those who are accused. You can almost see it now. A line of villagers standing in the church, pointing at one another, each trying to look as innocent as possible while secretly relieved that, for the moment, it isn't them in the center of attention. But relief doesn't last long in a world where suspicion moves like wildfire. Today, it's someone else. Tomorrow, it could be you. The domino effect doesn't just destroy lives, it destroys trust. Once a village has gone through a witch hunt, it is never quite the same again. Neighbors stop speaking. Families avoid each other. The air stays heavy with the memory of betrayal. Long after the fires have gone cold, once the whispers turn into formal accusations, life changes instantly. The moment someone is named, they're no longer seen as a neighbor, a friend, or even fully human. They become the witch, a shadowy figure of fear and blame. And once that label sticks, the village treats you like a threat that must be contained. You're often dragged from your home, usually with no warning. There's no chance to pack belongings or explain yourself. A small group of men arrives, flanked by the priest or the local magistrate, and their faces are set with a kind of grim certainty. People gather to watch, whispering as you're led away, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Even those who once trusted you now step back, as though your presence alone could bring harm. The place you're taken to isn't a courtroom. It's usually a crude cell, damp and cold, often little more than a corner of a stone building or a makeshift wooden cage. There's no comfort here. The floor is uneven, and the straw they've thrown down for bedding is damp and crawling with insects. You sit there with nothing but the sound of your own breathing and the distant voices of villagers going on with their lives, as if you've already been erased from their world. There's no such thing as innocent until proven guilty. In this time, from the moment you're accused, everyone assumes there's at least some truth to the story. The trial is less about finding out what happened and more about confirming what people already believe. You're questioned endlessly. Why do you keep herbs? Who taught you those prayers you mutter under your breath? Did you ever see a strange figure in the woods? No matter what you say, they twist your words. You're not allowed much rest either. The guards or elders might wake you throughout the night, demanding answers. Even silence is taken as proof. They'll say the devil has sealed your lips. And if you cry, they'll say you're trying to charm them with fake emotion. It's an impossible trap. If the questioning doesn't bring them satisfaction, they'll bring witnesses. A neighbor swears she saw you staring at her baby just before it became sick. A farmer claims his cow stopped giving milk after you passed by. None of these things are real evidence. But in a room full of frightened faces, it feels convincing enough. Sometimes even your friends or relatives testify against you, not because they believe you're guilty, but because they're terrified of what will happen if they don't. The waiting is the hardest part. Days stretch on with no sign of resolution. You're left alone with your thoughts, trying to make sense of how your life turned upside down so quickly. The quiet of the cell presses in on you. Every sound outside, the creak of a door, the clang of a bell, makes your stomach knot, because you never know if it means someone's coming for you. Food, if they give you any, is little more than stale bread or a thin broth. Sometimes the guards are kind enough to offer a word of reassurance, but even that feels hollow. They might believe you're innocent, but they'll never say it aloud. No one dares to go against the tide of public opinion. At night, the cold seeps through the walls and into your bones. Sleep comes in broken fragments, interrupted by dreams of angry faces and the harsh sound of your own name shouted by a crowd. You start to realize that being accused isn't just about proving innocence. It's about surviving long enough to even have the chance. And for most, that chance never comes. In the stillness of your cell, you understand something cruel and unshakable. Once they've decided you're guilty, your life no longer belongs to you. It belongs to their fear, their gossip, and their desperate need to believe that punishing you will make their world safer. When an accusation leads to a verdict of guilt, the next step is both punishment and performance. Executions are not carried out quietly. They are events designed to shock, to terrify, and to remind everyone what happens when you stray. The villagers gather, not just to witness justice, but because they can't look away from the drama. It's cruel, but it's also the only form of theatre they know, a grim story acted out in real life. The most common method of execution depends on where you live. In England, witches are usually hanged. A wooden scaffold is built in the square, and the rope swings like a pale snake against the sky. People start gathering early, murmuring and shifting their feet. Children tugging at their mothers' skirts to get a better view. By the time the condemned is led out, the crowd is humming with the same kind of restless energy you'd find before a festival. Except there's nothing to celebrate here. In parts of Europe, burning at the stake is more common. The accused is tied to a wooden post, surrounded by a pile of dry sticks and branches. A single torch, carried by a solemn guard, is enough to turn the pile into a roaring inferno. The flames climb higher as the smoke fills the air, the crowd holding its breath as if witnessing something both holy and horrifying. Some claim the fire purifies the soul, burning away the devil's influence. But for the person tied to the post, it's nothing but pain and terror. There are even crueler methods. In Scotland and Germany, some accused witches are strangled before burning. A small mercy meant to spare them the worst of the flames. In other places, like France, executions can involve elaborate rituals, with priests chanting and crowds shouting prayers, as though their voices could drown out the cries of the condemned. The crowd's reaction is unsettling. Some people watch with satisfaction, convinced they're seeing evil defeated. Others watch with fear, as if by staring long enough they can convince themselves it could never happen to them. A few watch with doubt, but they don't dare speak their thoughts. To question the execution is to invite suspicion, and no one wants to take that risk. Imagine being led through the square, your wrists bound, the weight of the rope cutting into your skin. The ground is uneven beneath your feet, the air heavy with the smell of smoke and sweat. The villagers' eyes follow you, some wide with pity, others sharp with judgment. The priest walks behind you, murmuring prayers, while the guards stay close, gripping your arms like they're afraid you might vanish. Even in those final moments, there is a strange sense of performance. The accused is expected to say something, a confession, a prayer, or a plea for mercy. If they stay silent, it's seen as proof of guilt. If they speak too boldly, it's taken as defiance. It's a stage with no good roles to play. After the execution, the crowd doesn't just disperse. People stay, talking in hushed voices, trading their own versions of what they just saw. Children ask questions, adults mutter about omens. By the next day, the story will grow larger, more dramatic. The witch didn't just scream, she cursed the sky. The fire didn't just burn, it roared with unnatural force. Executions are meant to bring closure, but they rarely do. Instead, they feed the fear. People leave the square both relieved and uneasy, thinking, what if there are more witches? And with that thought, the cycle of suspicion begins again. For you, standing in the center of all this, it's the fear of becoming a spectacle, of being turned into a story that will be told and retold long after you're gone. A story where your name no longer belongs to you, but to the legend of the witch they believe you are. Before an execution, there is always the moment of final judgment. It doesn't happen in the way we might imagine, no grand courtroom with lawyers and evidence. Instead, it is often a makeshift trial held in the church or in the open square, with the villagers standing shoulder to shoulder, watching your fate unfold like spectators at a play. You're brought forward, hands bound, the rough rope digging into your skin. The air smells of candle wax and damp stone, and the floor beneath your feet is uneven, worn smooth by years of boots and bare soles. Father Anselm stands at the front, flanked by the village elders, all wearing expressions that pretend to be neutral but can't quite hide the tension. The accusations are read aloud, each one delivered like a hammer striking wood. She cursed the crops. She bewitched the children. She danced with spirits on the edge of the forest. None of it is true, but truth doesn't hold much weight here. What matters is how the crowd reacts. Every gasp, every murmur, every exchanged glance fuels the fire. You're asked to respond, to defend yourself. But what can you say? Every word you speak feels like it could be turned against you. If you say nothing, they'll call it guilt. If you protest too loudly, They'll say the devil is speaking through you. You answer quietly, trying to stay calm, but you can feel the weight of their stares pressing on you like a physical force. Witnesses are called. Neighbors you've known for years. A woman swears she saw you walking in the woods at night. A man claims his cow died after you looked at it. You want to laugh at the absurdity, but laughter would only make you look mad, or worse, defiant. So you stand there, your heart pounding, listening as people you once shared bread with now speak of you as though you're something dangerous. The priest asks you to confess. If you admit your sins, he says, God may forgive you, but you know what that really means. Confession doesn't save you, it simply confirms their story, feeding the fear and giving them the satisfaction of hearing you say the words they want. The trial is short. It always is. The verdict feels inevitable, like it was decided before you even stepped into the room. A murmur spreads through the crowd as the priest declares that you are guilty. There is no cheer, no celebration, just a heavy, uneasy silence. Even those who believe the verdict feel a strange discomfort. They've seen justice served, but they've also seen a life end. As you lead away, the crowd parts. Some people avoid looking at you. Others stare openly, their faces a mix of fear and relief. Fear that it could have been them, and relief that it isn't. The church bell tolls, slow and solemn, marking the end of the trial and the beginning of the final act. In the hours that follow, you wait in a small, dark cell. The air is damp and cold. Somewhere outside, you hear voices preparing for what's to come. The ropes are being tied. The wood is being stacked. And through it all, you feel the strange, heavy stillness of knowing your fate is sealed. Even now, there's a part of you that hopes someone will speak up, that a friend, a neighbor, anyone will come forward and say, this is wrong. But no one does. People are too afraid. Speaking out against your judgment would mean taking your place, so they stay silent, and you sit alone, listening to the slow drip of water in the corner of the cell, waiting for the moment when the doors open again. The final judgment isn't just about declaring someone guilty. It's about reaffirming the fear that holds the village together. With every accusation and every execution, the people convince themselves they are safer. But deep down, they know the fear will only grow stronger, waiting for its next victim. Even if you are spared by some twist of mercy, by a confession that convinces them to release you, or by the rare decision of a magistrate who sees the madness for what it is, life is never the same. An accusation of witchcraft lingers like smoke in the air. You may walk free, but the whispers follow you everywhere. The village no longer sees you as a neighbor or a friend. You're a reminder of fear, a walking cautionary tale. When you pass through the market, conversations fall silent. People step aside, not too close, as if whatever they imagined about you still clings to your skin. Even if you try to smile, to show that you are the same person you were before, the warmth has gone out of their eyes. You are not simply you anymore. You are the one who was accused. Sometimes the damage goes beyond stares. People stop trading with you. They avoid your bread, your milk, your herbs, convinced that touching anything from your hands might carry a curse. Children are told not to look at you too long, not to let you speak to them. And if someone falls ill or a harvest fails again, the old accusations rise like ghosts. Maybe they let her go too soon, they whisper. Maybe she fooled the priest. In truth, an accusation of witchcraft leaves scars that run deeper than any prison cell. It steals the simple rhythms of daily life, the sense of belonging that every villager needs to survive. You are marked, not with a brand or a rope, but with a shadow of suspicion that never quite fades. Some who survive choose to leave. They pack what little they own and walk away, hoping to find a place where no one knows their name, where the stories haven't already been told. But starting over is hard. Strangers ask questions. And when you have lived through the nightmare of being accused, every question sounds like the beginning of a new rumor. The irony is that witch hunts never truly need witches to survive. They feed on fear, and fear doesn't vanish when an execution is over. The villagers, standing in their square, go home still uneasy, still wondering who might be next. The more they try to purge evil, the more it seems to hide in every shadow. Every unlucky moment, every misfortune. And so the cycle continues. Looking back on it now, the whole idea feels surreal, that a birthmark, a black cat, or a handful of dried herbs could spark a chain of events that ends in ropes and fire. But that was the reality of the time. The fear of witchcraft wasn't about magic at all. It was about control, about giving shape to the unknown. People would rather believe in witches than face the truth that the world is random, cruel, and often impossible to predict. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the echoes of it. The murmur of the crowd, the ringing of the church bell, the uneven footsteps on the dirt road as someone is led away. And even though centuries have passed, that fear feels uncomfortably familiar, because deep down, humans still cling to the same instinct. When something goes wrong, someone must be to blame. For the accused, the ordeal never truly ends. Whether they are spared or condemned, they become part of the story that the village tells itself. And in that story, they are never just a person. They are the witch, the shadow that everyone remembers, long after the torches burn out. The story of witchcraft accusations is not just about history. It's about the fragile threads that hold a community together, and how easily those threads can snap under the weight of fear. Tonight, as you let this tale settle in your mind, take a slow breath and imagine the village now, quiet, the fires smoldering, the sky fading to a deep indigo. The crowds are gone, the gossip is hushed, and the only sound is the soft rustle of wind moving through the empty streets. Picture yourself stepping away from the square, away from the tension and the fear. The ground beneath your feet is cool and soft, the air sharp with the scent of earth and wood smoke. Each step feels lighter, as though the echoes of judgment and whispers are fading behind you. The path ahead is calm and empty, a place where no one is watching, no one is pointing fingers, and the weight of suspicion drifts off your shoulders like dust. The stars begin to appear overhead, faint at first and then brighter, like tiny lanterns scattered across the dark sky. You tilt your head and breathe in the stillness, feeling your chest rise and fall in a steady rhythm. The night is cool but gentle, the kind of night that feels as though the world has slowed just for you. You pass by the edge of the woods, the trees swaying softly, their branches whispering secrets you don't need to understand. There's no danger here, only quiet, only peace. You pause for a moment, closing your eyes, and imagine that every harsh voice, every sharp glance, every fear from the past is dissolving into the night air. The only thing left is the soft hum of the earth beneath you and the slow beat of your own heart. As you find a place to rest, you picture lying down under the open sky. The ground is cool and steady beneath you, and the stars above feel infinite. With every breath, your body sinks deeper into comfort. Your shoulders loosen, your jaw softens, The last fragments of tension melt away, and your thoughts grow slower, softer, like leaves drifting on a calm stream. You are safe now, far from the echoes of the past. There is no judgment here, no fear, only stillness. Your breathing deepens, the air filling your lungs like a gentle wave, and you feel your body grow heavier, as though the earth itself is cradling you. The stars blur slightly as your eyes close, your mind sinking into quiet. You let go of the stories, of the noise, of the day, and allow yourself to drift into the kind of rest that feels endless and warm. There is no rush, no one is watching. Only you and the night, steady and calm. Sleep well and good night.